counting against you in the minds of some people in the electorate of Longman?
Well, I can thank you and your colleagues in the media for reminding me every day about how conscious people out in the electorate would be of the fact of my age. I've taken a very open, honest and accountable approach, and I'm very proud of the local grassroots campaign that we've run here in Longman. I think we faced big challenges, and I think there were big issues that needed to be discussed and solutions found, and we've taken a very traditional approach to the campaign here. We've been out there campaigning door to door. I've been doing a lot of forums and making myself as valuable as possible. But I think it is very important to realise that the result still is not known here, and we could be in for a very long night and possibly a longer tomorrow.
So tell me this, when did you first start turning over in your mind the possibility that you might seek a career in politics?
Well, you don't wake up one day and say, I want to be a federal parliamentarian, or I certainly didn't. I got sick of sitting on the sidelines and complaining. It's very easy to complain. It's very difficult to make a stand for what you believe in, and certainly in my case to put my head on the chopping block for the Labor Party, and that's exactly what I did. I made a stand for what I believe in. I made a stand on the big issues that face this region as we grow, and effectively over time I made the decision that I would put my name to what I believe in and make that stand.
So, but just tell me this, how did the interest in politics develop? What has driven you?
How did
the interest in politics?
Well, I think I never saw myself naturally attracted to politics. I think politics is something that people do genuinely feel excluded by or disenfranchised by, and politicians are not highly regarded out in the public. They are considered used car salesmen or lawyers, but
or
the reality is that within a major... Yeah, or journalists, sorry mate. But the reality is that inside a major political party, this is where you can make a real difference, and I felt that I could make a contribution to the team, and I decided why not give it a go, put my hand up, be judged on what I say and what I do, and I took a very open, honest, accountable approach. I made myself very available for everybody out there in this great community, and hopefully that is enough to get me across the line, but I think we are in for a very, very long night and possibly a long tomorrow.
And if you do get into the Parliament, as the people on this panel are expecting, what would be one overriding goal that you would take into the Parliament with you?
Well, I want to be the politician that is known for being honest, accountable and available. I want to be potentially the politician that is available and that gets back to people, that is connected to the community and has their pulse on the issues that are affecting them. Here in Longman, there are some very big challenges facing us in the future and for the long term, and that's how I would like to be considered, but we're not there yet, Kerry. I think that's important to stress, and let's see how we go tonight.
Well, congratulations for your achievements so far, and thanks for talking with us.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Okay, that was Wyatt Roy, who we think is going to take his place in the Australian Parliament as the youngest MP in Australian history. Let's take a look at the chamber now, Anthony, and see what sense we can make of how the new Parliament is going to look.
Well, at this stage, we're definitely giving away 69 seats to the Labor Party, 71 to the Coalition, although one of those is O'Connor, and it's not clear whether it's a Liberal or a National seat. The Greens have got one seat and there's 4 independents. The extra one we're giving away, Andrew Wilkie, we're saying he's one Denison. We're giving away, I think, 1 extra seat with the likely phase of this graphic. It's having a bit of a stutter there, but it's getting there. And now we're going to go on and make our prediction that we're prepared to publish at this stage. And it's having a real think about this one. Here we go. Let's reveal it. 72, 73, 1 and 4. I have 5 seats left in doubt. They are Corangamite, Lindsay and Greenway. I happen to think Labor will win all 3. They're further ahead than the predicted model indicates. And the Liberals are ahead in Boothby and Hasluck. And Hasluck's not got a very strong long count.
Yeah. But would those...
We don't know.
Swan we won't get.
But would that be consistent with those numbers? 73 Lib Nat, 72 Labor?
It would be 1 seat either way, 2 seats either way, but that also applies to the counting of the postal votes and everything to come.
What's your calculation on Hasluck now?
I've got the Liberals 0.5% ahead. Hold on, just let me check that. based on preference counts in half of the booths, and the swing is 1.4. So you've got to wait. Yeah.
My 200 votes are still looking respectable.
Anyway, I think what's clear, no one will have a majority tonight.
No, that's
it's
right.
not even clear which party's got more seats.
No, I think Nick and I are in screaming agreement that neither of us can find 76. It might be 72, 73, 74. That'll take not just tonight. It'll take tomorrow, and it'll take all of next week.
Next week, I agree.
So This is going to be a long, patient wait. And I don't know whether the ABC had committed itself to broadcasting until the result was known, but if you do, it's going to be
We'll
ABC
keep
24 for a long
broadcasting
time.
until I slump forward onto the desk. We're not there yet. We're going to cross to Tony Jones on the tally room floor, and Sarah Hanson-Young of the Greens, I think, has joined in.
Indeed, we've got Sarah Hanson-Young and Penny Wong and George Brandis, but we'll start with Sarah Hanson-Young. And extraordinary night for the Greens. 9 senators you're looking at.
Look, it looks as though that's the case. In total, of course, with Senator Bob Brown and myself and Scott Ludlam, who are not up for re-election. But the poll results are showing that we would secure a senator in every state. Of course, and we miss out possibly in the ACT, although we haven't given up. But it seems as though the preferences from the Democrats going to the Liberals there might mean that we don't win that seat when indeed probably we should have.
Well, that is the critical, from your point of view, the critical one, because if you were able to take a Senate seat in the ACT, as we were discussing earlier, you could actually have the balance of power immediately, as opposed to in July. That's correct, isn't it?
It's the interesting thing about the Senate is that for the states, senators take up their spots on the 1st of July. So we have to wait until then to get all those 9 senators in place. But until then, the territory senators start the day after the day of the election. So of course we would have been able to knock off and nullify the power of Steve Fielding and Family First if indeed we'd managed to get Lynn Hatfield Dodds up. But as I said, it's still an outside chance, but we'll see.
The first Green MP in the history of the Australian Parliament. But what's happening in Grayndler? Because that could go down to the wire as well. There's a Green potentially with the possibility of knocking off Anthony Albanese, Government Minister.
Look, first and foremost, Adam Bandt's campaign in Melbourne was outstanding. Fantastic campaign. I spent a lot of time there myself over the last couple of weeks supporting him. It's just absolutely exciting for the Greens and Green supporters right around the country to see a first Green MP. Now in their seat of Grayndler, well, we're pushing the ALP to the wire on that one. We're still an outside chance, but we'll have to sit back and wait.
George Brandis, very new Senate, a very different Senate. What's it going to be like being in it?
Well, I think obviously one of the big messages from this election has been the rise of the Greens, and particularly on the Labor Party's left. I mean, this is a breakthrough election for the Greens, I think, and I think this will be enormously consequential for the Labor Party, because increasingly you are finding particularly inner city Labor voters choose to vote for the Greens rather than for the Labor Party. That has meant that they've taken at least one seat, Melbourne, from Labor, possibly Grayndler as well. And I think that this is going to continue in electoral cycles as far as the eye can see, that the Greens will split left-wing politics in this country in a way that is quite unprecedented, unprecedented in our lifetime.
I want to come back to you in a moment and hear how you think Tony Abbott might be able to form a government out of this strange scenario that we've got in the House of Representatives. But first of all, Penny Wong, do you take on board what's being said here about this being an extraordinary shift?
Absolutely accept that we've seen Labor lose some of its primary vote to the Greens, and the reality is the Greens are in a contest with the Labor Party. The Greens aren't in a contest with a coalition, and they are there to try and take votes off Labor, not off the Conservatives. So that's the reality of the seats in which they focus on. Melbourne and Grayndler has been commented on. I don't have any information that suggests that Anthony's not going to hold that seat. He's obviously an outstanding member of Parliament, a very high-profile minister and a very tough fighter. I don't know why people are suggesting that seat's gone to the Greens, but that's not my information.
Sarah Hanson-Young might be able to give you some information.
Look, one of the things I just firstly wanted to point out is, yes, I think in seats like Melbourne, it was definitely those people who are disillusioned with the Labor Party, whether it be over the delay and lack of real action on climate change, lack of compassion in particular for refugees and asylum seekers, or indeed the absolute refusal to deal with the discrimination within the Marriage Act. But when you look at our numbers across the board, we've actually really broadened the support from the city to the bush.
Right.
And the Nationals are polling 4 or 5%, and we're up in the vicinity of 11 and 12. We're actually taking over the National Party.
Here's a political question for you. How are you going to use the balance of power in the Senate and your seat, or potentially even seats, in the House of Reps? How are you going to use it?
Well,
what will you use it for?
responsibly, of course.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that we've been able to show in the last couple of years, particularly with our negotiation with the government over the stimulus package, was to get that through. We didn't want to see the country go into recession.
Okay, but
we wanted a better dividend for it.
I asked Penny Wong about this earlier. You're going to be sort of, if Labor were to cobble together some kind of minority government, would you be pushing them much, much harder on environmental issues, on social issues like gay marriage, etc.?
Look, I think the people around the country today have really voted for change. They want change from everyone. And our support, the Greens' growth in support across the country, both in the lower house and in the Senate.
Well, how hardball are you going to be? That's my question.
Look, it's about negotiating.
Are you going to be pushing them to change their policies, key policies?
Look, I think
if they manage to form a government, because that's completely up in the air.
Of course, the Greens are going to have to work with whomever wins government, if it ends up being Tony Abbott or Julia Gillard. And we're going to have to get the better outcomes. That's the wonderful thing about the Senate. Negotiation.
I look forward to the negotiation, Sarah, if you do have to work. I don't look forward to this because it would mean we would have lost, but if Tony became Prime Minister, it'd be very interesting to watch how that negotiation will go.
Yeah, well, let's actually hear from George Brandis on that. We've talked about how the Labor might be able to cobble together some kind of minority government. Let's talk about how Tony Abbott might be able to do it.
Well, I think what's clear, to form a government, you need to have the support of a majority of members of the House of Representatives, so you need 76 votes. Now, what is reasonably clear from your projections, which I think are right, is that it's very difficult to get the Labor Party above 72 seats. Very difficult to get, and that's even making conservative assumptions that all these line ball seats like Lindsay and Greenway go to the Labor Party. It may well be that they fall below 72, but it's hard to get them above 72 seats. So they appear to have lost the seat count. They have lost the two-party preferred vote, 50.1 to 49.9 to the coalition, and they are way behind on the primary vote by 5% or more.
So the most wanted men tonight in Australia are the three Conservative members of Parliament, who I presume Tony Abbott could well be speaking to on the telephone right now.
Well, who can say? But I mean, this is.
Isn't that what you would do?
The thought of a party that has wound up with fewer seats, fewer votes, and fewer two-candidate preferred votes than the opposition, trying to cobble together some sort of government, is a bit reminiscent of what Gordon Brown absurdly tried to do earlier in the year after the British election. The outstanding message of tonight is that Labor has lost the moral authority to govern.
All right, let's see from Penny.
I think we're already pitching. George is already campaigning for the negotiation with the independents.
The numbers never lie, Penny.
Well, actually, the majority of Australia probably voted left of centre if you count the votes for the Greens and the Labor Party, which is
a preferential system, you know, so we can test that.
Hang on, George Brandis, just hold on for 1 second.
Could I just say, I understand in Grayndler we actually have a 48% Labor primary vote to Anthony Albanese. It's an extremely good result and shows that progressive people inside the Parliament, inside the Labor Party, can also get the support of their electorate. So that's a great result for Anthony.
Okay, but even if you got the Green MP and you got Andrew Wilkie to sign up, who among the three Conservative MPs would you manage to negotiate with to form a Labor coalition government?
Tony, I don't think that's for me to start to speculate on at this
But
point.
do you think it's possible?
No, look, I think
it's still possible for those negotiations to happen
look,
with both sides.
Ultimately, we will see where the seats fall, to which party they will fall. We still have seats which are not determined, which are too close to call. We still have votes coming in WA. We have lots of votes still not counted in some of the seats that you're counting in both sides of the ledger. I'm certainly not going to get ahead of myself and start to make a suggestion about how you might negotiate.
George Brandis, talk us through those negotiations.
You see, he's willing
Well,
to get ahead.
I'm not in a position to do that, and I wouldn't propose.
How would you imagine they would go,
propose
though?
to do that?
What would you say if you were in a position?
Well,
what would you say to them to try and convince them?
Let me just make this point, Tony. The numbers never lie in politics. We've had the election. We're not campaigning now. We're assessing where the burden of opinion of the country lies. And it appears on every metric by which the burden of opinion of the country can be measured. The country has voted to throw out this government.
Okay, that's where I'm going to leave the three of you for now. I'm sorry, Sarah. We've got to go back to hear more about how all those numbers are panning out. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're going to take a look now at the national picture, and of course this is one occasion where the national vote comes into play, because along with the number of seats won by Liberal or Labor, the size of the vote for each party is going to be a factor potentially in determining who governs with a minority government for the next 3 years, or for however long within that 3 years that they can govern. So let's look at the national vote. We've got 73.6% of the vote counted. We see that Labor is on 49.7% and the Coalition is on 50.3%. That's a 3% swing to the Liberal Party. And bear in mind that that two-party preferred number hasn't shifted for quite a while now. We're going to cross to Lee Sales for a breakdown of those numbers.
Thanks, Kerry. To summarise, for viewers who might only be switching on their televisions now, it's not clear who will form government at this stage. The most likely outcome of the election is a hung parliament, with the balance of power held by 4 independents and a Green. In terms of the seats won so far, the Labor Party has 69. It has lost 15 seats. The Coalition has 70 seats, having picked up 13. The Greens have 1 seat that they've picked up in Melbourne, the seat where the Finance Minister Lindsay Tanner has retired. And the minor parties and independents have 4 seats. There were 3 independents in the last parliament. There is now 1 additional independent who's picked up what was formerly a safe Labor seat in Tasmania, the seat of Denniston. How does the primary vote look? Let's take a look at our graph. Labor is on 38.1% of the primary vote. The Coalition has 43.8%. The Greens sitting on 11.6%, and the minor parties and others on about 6.5%. If we consider that up against the 2007 results, it gives us an idea of the swings that we're seeing. Labor is experiencing a 5.3% swing against it. The Coalition a 1.7% swing to it. The Greens a 3.8% swing to them, and minor parties, independents and others a 0.1% swing away from them. The Chamber. How is that looking at this stage of the night? In terms of the seats that have actually been won, as I said, the ALP 69, the Coalition 70 seats, the Greens have 1 seat, others 4, as I mentioned. That's with almost 3/4 of the vote counted. When we factor in a few of the likely seats that parties are bound to pick up, taking into mind, for example, the fact that Western Australian numbers are still coming in substantially, the ALP we say is on 70, the Coalition on 72, the Greens on 1, others with 4. So you can see that's why we're predicting at this stage it's likely to end up being a hung parliament. Now, a lot of seats have changed hands tonight. In case you've missed them, I'll recap some of the highest profile ones. Let's start with Denniston, which I mentioned earlier. That's a seat that Labor's Duncan Kerr has held since 1987. He's retiring in this election. Oh, sorry, we've got the graphic from Melbourne up. We'll talk about that instead. Adam Bandt has taken that seat. It's a seat where Lindsay Tanner was retiring, as I mentioned. 65% of the vote counted. Adam Bandt, the lawyer, is going to take that seat for the Greens and represent them in the House of Representatives. Bennelong, have we got the Bennelong graphic? Yes, we do. 80% of the vote counted. Maxine McHugh's conceded. You may have heard her in our broadcast earlier. John Alexander, the former tennis professional, has taken that seat for the Coalition with a 5.2% swing to the Liberal Party. Longman, Wyatt Roy, just spoke to Kerry O'Brien a short time ago. He's only 20, the youngest person ever elected to the Parliament. That seat on the outskirts of Brisbane, with almost 80% counted, there's been a 4.3% swing, and Wyatt Roy will be joining the Parliament. Leichhardt, in the north of Queensland, 70% of the vote counted there. Warren Entsch is going to be returning to the Parliament. He retired in 2007, but he decided to give his parliamentary career another go this year, and he has enjoyed an 8.1% swing there. If we can go to the Northern Territory, the seat of Solomon, 66% of the vote counted there. The Liberal Party is going to take that. Natasha Griggs with a 2% swing. It's a seat that Labor picked up in the Rudd slide in 2007, but they're going to be losing it this time around. Of course, some other seats have changed hands too. Those I've given are just a sample at this stage. I'll be back in half an hour or so with another summary.
Okay, back to the panel, and I'll just see if both of our panel experts are on the phone. We'll just see if they've got anything to tell us.
Thanks.
What's do you make any? Have you got anything further in Western Australia, Stephen?
Just my people are adamant that whilst Hasluck is very, very, very tight, they've been through this twice before. This will be the third time they've gone through it. They still reckon that we're in the hunt for a very narrow win there. But you know, as I obviously concede to Nick, it's pre-polls, it's postals, etc. I don't think we can advance this much further tonight. We can't get 76. Nick can't get 76. It's a hung parliament. There's a half a dozen seats which will determine whether we end up with 74, whether the Libs end up with 73, 74. We won't know this until potentially as late as the end of next week. We've had a substantial postal vote in the seats that count, a substantial pre-poll in the seats that count, albeit that the pre-polls that you cast in your own electorate, they'll be counted tonight. And given the closeness of it, you'd have to expect that there'll be recounts as well, and that's irrespective of any suggestions of mistakes, etc. They'll be close, and the stakes are very high, so there'll be counts and recounts. So this is a time when eternal patience will be required, and in the end, it'll be, in my view, Prime Minister Gillard given the option of trying to form a minority government first. And time will tell how the independents and the Green respond to that.
Yeah, very quickly, Nick, because we've got Bob Katter on the phone.
We're likely to have more seats than Labor. We've clearly won the primary vote. We're 5 percentage points ahead of Labor on primaries, and we've been ahead on two-party preferred vote all night. So I think
this
is
neck and neck,
in a sense, the Liberal Party is the winner out of tonight.
The 2PP is 49.7 to 50.3. That'll vary.
We've been ahead all night,
depending upon pre-polls and postals.
We'll pick up on this, but at the moment, Bob Katter, who has been the independent member of the seat of Kennedy for a long time now in North Queensland, and is one of the three independents, one of the four independents who will be helping to resolve the fate of the next government. Bob Katter, you can hear me on the phone line?
Yes.
So, Bob, suddenly you find yourself in this position after all these years. Did you see it coming?
Oh, Kerry, I was a very powerful position in the latter years of the Jockey-Peterson government, and all week, people have been speculating. I've been out in the campaign trail, and I suppose campaigning is listening to people, the people in the electorate. I really haven't had a picture of what's been happening in the wider world, so I just have to take your word for it.
So tell me this. What are the key principles that will guide you in any negotiations about which party you would back in minority government? What would be the guiding principles?
Yeah, I have said continuously and continuingly that I don't purport to speak for my fellow independents. We're very good friends, we work very well together, and but they must speak for themselves. And we have agreed that we will simply close the door, we'll sit down and have a long conversation with each other the three of us, and maybe the four of us if there's a fourth one, and we'll come to a conclusion about the process, or we hope we will agree to a process by which we would see the government move confidently forward. But you've got to understand that every country on earth, there's no country on earth left with a two-party system. America has a constituency-based system, entirely different. They don't vote along party lines in their parliament called a Congress. We are now moving into what is the situation in the rest of the world. You know, we no longer have a two-party system, and that means that other people's viewpoints, we're not in a two corporate Woolworths and Coles economy. There are other players out there and other viewpoints, and this two corporation politics has led to the demise of rural Australia. We just simply, every town in rural Australia is losing population. Every industry is closing down, and that's not exaggeration. I can actually back that up with statistical evidence if you wish me to provide it for you.
So just tell me this. Are you saying that the three of you are likely to operate as a bloc? And it sounds to me as if you would want to have discussions, careful discussions, with at least those other two independents, Tony Windsor and Rob Oakeshott, before you sit down and have substantial conversations with either of the major parties?
We've already agreed to do that. We've had very extensive discussions before the Parliament rose, because it was a situation that was unfolding in that direction, and we decided that that is what we would do. And I think that that's a responsible course of action on our part. But I can't speak for the other independents, but as far as I'm concerned, the gong goes to whoever's going to allow rural Australia to survive. And we've had 12 years of LNP government, smashed us into the ground, and the ALP government in 3 years hasn't restored anything. If anything, things have continued to get worse. Now, you know, all we're asking for is the right to survive, and we most certainly haven't enjoyed that now for probably 20, 25 years.
So in that context, you're not necessarily going to be swayed by issues like one party having one or maybe two seats more than the other, or one party having maybe 1% or 0.5% of the vote more than the other?
Kerry, I think that Tony and Rob and myself would take a whole range of issues into account. But to me, the overwhelming issue is survival for rural Australia.
Okay.
By the quirk of fate or the enlightenment of the democratic system, we have got a position of power, and surely we must exercise that to try and ensure survival for our people, which we haven't enjoyed and we're not enjoying at the present moment. And there are some obvious answers out there to turn that around.
Okay, Bob Katter, look, I appreciate you coming onto the phone to share that with us, and good luck with your deliberations, but thanks very much for talking with us.
Thank you very much, Kerry.
Now, I understand that we've got Tony Windsor standing by. He comes from the seat of New England, which he's also held for some years. He came out of the New South Wales party. Tony Windsor, I think, was originally a National as well.
Elected as an independent.
But elected as an independent, but I think had some... He'll correct me anyway. Tony Windsor, you can hear me okay?
Yes, Kerry, I can hear you.
Good. I don't know whether... Were you able to hear what Bob Katter was saying?
Most of it, and I concur with what I did hear, that I think, you know, we've got to sort of be a little bit cool and examine what's actually going on and allow the process to work a little bit more before we all start running off in different directions. So I think what Bob was telling you, that Rob Oakeshott, Bob and myself would probably get together and just talk about what's in front of us and maybe seek some advice in terms of what could happen in relation to the formation of a government. And I think the key issue here is what do you do to make sure that what's put in place is actually stable in terms of governance for a period of time. Otherwise, we might end up back at the polls.
And, well, that's a very real possibility, of course, but do you agree with Bob Katter that it's it's not just about an argument of who got the biggest number of seats or the biggest volume of votes, that you will be taking issues into account? Would you also take into account whether Labor has any privilege because Julia Gillard is the sitting current Prime Minister? Does that have any bearing at all?
Oh, well, I wouldn't get into specifics, but obviously a lot of things come into play. But the main thing is that if we go down a pathway, what does it do in terms of the stability of government within the country? And if we can't reach a conclusion to that, well, there are other options. But there's a lot of things that can be considered, but I see it in a very serious vein. I don't think it's a toy to be played with. And but I think it needs to be done in the clear light of day, with people actually thinking things through rather than being bought off with various trinkets, etc. So that's the way I'll go down the path of trying to wrestle with it. That's if in fact there is a hung parliament, and I don't think there's any guarantees that that's a fact yet either.
Well, both the Labor and Liberal members of this panel, neither can see a way really to government in their own right with 76 seats, so that does certainly seem the likelihood. But it sounds to me as if you will want to sit down with your independent colleagues and have very careful discussions that presumably could take place over several days before you consider talking with either of the major party leaders. Is that the case?
Oh, very much so. Actually, I had a phone call from Julia Gillard earlier tonight just to congratulate me on winning the seat. And there's a message for me to ring Joe Hockey, so I presume Joe would want to be talking about my victory. I'm sure that's why he'd be ringing. But no, I'm quite happy to sit and talk to people. But I think it's got to be done coolly and not rushed, because if people get this wrong, it doesn't only damage a few politicians' career, it can possibly damage the nation. So I'm going to be proceeding slowly rather than jumping to a whole range of conclusions based on a whole range of assumptions. And it may not be my vote that makes any difference at all. There could be scenarios that unfold where others decide for themselves, and that's their right. I'm the member for New England. I haven't been suddenly made the king of New England.
Well, what you may well find is that you've suddenly got a whole raft of new friends, new best friends.
Oh, I'm sure they'll be there. I was in a hung parliament in 1991, and there was an amazing number of friends I had at that time. Quite a lot of them went on holidays in 1995.
Tony Windsor, thanks very much for talking with us. These are incredibly interesting times in Australian political history. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Kerry.
Now, here we are in this wonderful age of sophisticated television, and we're relying on the telephone, and we're going to keep going because we've got Rob Oakeshott on the phone, presumably from Port Macquarie. Rob Oakeshott came into the Parliament in the by-election and then has absolutely cemented his position. Rob Oakeshott, can you hear me?
I can, Kerry, and I'm sorry I can't get a line out, and telecommunications is one of our issues.
Ah, well, a point well made.
We've got a plan for him.
As I just said to Tony Windsor, you're about to have a whole lot of new best friends.
Yeah, well, I hope so. If the topic is telecommunications, we had some trouble getting on late line on Monday night, and I've had some trouble talking to some journalists throughout the week on mobile phones. So you don't need to be Einstein to know one of the issues we'll be talking about over the next week.
This has been an incredible ride for you, really. I mean, talk about a fascinating entree to politics. You haven't been there all that long, have you?
Well, I was in a state parliament for 12 years.
Well, true.
I've done some numbers, and between Bob Catter, Tony Windsor and myself, there's 68 years of public life. So, one of the issues I think we'll be looking for, again, you don't have to be Einstein to realise that we'll be looking for stable representation. And I would hope, through all the murkiness and difficulties of the next week or two, that everyone can put the political party loyalties to one side, and we can work in the greater good of some good outcomes over the next 3 years through the Parliament, and that will mean some people probably parking those loyalties, and hopefully if we can do that, I think this is a stimulus package for democracy. I think this is a really exciting time. It is getting the Parliament back to that real issue and that original concept, which is of the people, by the people, for the people. And so, as difficult it is for those on your panel, I actually think and say, bring it on.
And Andrew Wilkie is a surprise new Member of Parliament, it seems, from Denison as an independent. Andrew Wilkie has come to the Parliament in a different way to yourselves and with a different background to you. He has previously run for the Greens. Would you contemplate bringing him into your tent in the early stages of discussion?
Look, I've got Tony Windsor's and Bob Katter's mobile numbers. I've actually never even talked to or met Adam Brandt or Andrew Wilkie. I'll be looking to do that over the next 24 hours. But realistically, this is an issue for 150 members of Parliament who've got elected tonight. This is not just about 5 people, and I would hope there's commitment from 150 people to get the best outcome for the country over the next week or two. If we can get stable government, regardless in what form, and don't just rule out, don't just make this a red tribe or a blue tribe concept. There are multi-party concepts that we can also consider. Let's think of all the options. Let's focus on the best interests for Australia, a good functioning Parliament, and I think potentially if we can do that, this is a really exciting time for Australia and Australian people.
Now, last question. You started political life as a National Party member, and you left that party disillusioned, but nonetheless, that was where your roots were. Do you still feel a connection to the Conservative side of politics in particular?
Oh, look, this has got nothing to do with history. I'm going to walk into any negotiations and any conversations with clean hands and with no wish list other than looking for, as I repeat, stable government and a focus on a Parliament that can deliver outcomes. I think the big message for the 2 major parties that's come out of this Saturday is that the Parliament absolutely underwhelmed Australia over the last 6 months. We saw political party leaders knifed in both parties. We saw policy backflips on both sides. And I think the sentiment that's come out loud and clear today is that is not good enough. And I, Tony, Bob, I hope Adam, I hope Andrew, and I hope the other 145 colleagues, no matter what brand they wear, if we are serious about the job description that we take on when we take on the role of being a Member of Parliament, it is to deliver for the country. Let's overwhelm Australia in the next Parliament, and I hope here's an opportunity to do it.
Rob Oakeshott, thanks very much for talking with us tonight, and again, good luck in the deliberations ahead. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so,
well,
this is going to be a long process.
Yeah, I think we're in a situation where we've got 72 seats, I think, almost certainly, with Hasluck, Corangamite, Greenway and Lindsay all in the balance. So it is possible we could win all 4 and form a majority government. So that is still a possibility. I don't know that that's a possibility for Labor, but it can't be ruled out. So I still think the outcome tonight is most likely to be a hung Parliament, but it will depend on which way those 4 seats are going to break.
Well, the outcome tonight is certainly a hung Parliament, and then we just have to wait and see, and we need to be deeply patient. I mean, I think what Bob Katter and Tony Windsor, Rob Oakeshott have said is that they're not going to be rushed by anyone or anything. So the last-minute phone calls from erstwhile Conservative colleagues I don't think is going to shake them into a coalition quickly. So this is just going to have to be a deeply patient exercise for all of us. There will be seats that pre-polls and postals will be tossed into. Some may change. There'll be recounts.
It's less than more likely, though, I think, isn't it, that you would get to 74 seats? You won't really.
I think firstly,
because that then brings into play potentially Andrew Wilkie and Adam Brandt.
I don't automatically leap to the assumption that Labor won't hold Denison. I think that's one of the ones where, no one contemplated a 3-way split, no one contemplated this occurring. it's very tight. I mean, Nick and I have been looking at the various.
See, if Greens' preferences go to Labor,
then it's all over.
Then it's a Labor seat.
Yeah.
Right.
So
we just don't know that.
So we've definitely got 3 independents. The 3 that we've just spoken to with inferior telecommunications, which is a point I'll make to them.
Yes, but you're the ones who've most recently been in government.
Free satellite phones.
We've definitely got a Green. So there's 3 plus the Green. There may or may not be one other. But my instinct is, and I've got nothing to base it on other than instinct and Nick Sherry, who's our best Tasmanian person, saying people should be very calm about this. I think that one could tip our way. So I don't discount us getting 73, 74. I know I'm the second last one standing saying I don't give up Hasluck, but it's on a night like this, it's not all going to fall Nick's way, and it's not all going to fall my way. So I think in a week's time we'll be looking at a comparable outcome where the Green member for Melbourne and those 3 independents, possibly 4, are making a judgment about who are they supporting. And at a time when the 2PP is 49.7 for us and 50.3, as the 3 rural independents made clear, that'll be a factor, but not the only factor. So there's a fair bit in this yet.
This could be a good opportunity for Tony Abbott to take a brief holiday, Nick. There might be absolutely nothing he can do for the next few days, and I would think that would drive him mad.
I would think he'll be doing a lot of talking. No time for a holiday.
But I would think you'd have to be very careful in your strategy about wanting to knock on the doors of those 3 independents too soon.
I agree, and I don't think it's proper for Stephen or I to go down that path.
No.
That is a matter, and I wouldn't. Neither of us would want to prejudice what is likely to happen over the course of the next week.
But there has been a developing culture of independence. It's been happening at state level. This has been a very interesting process in New South Wales with Tony Windsor and with Luke Shott.
I think there was also a very salutary point which I think Rob made, is that they're all previously experienced state members of Parliament. They're all they've all been around a bit, and so they're
all passionate about the bush.
They will make their own considered, careful judgment, and they made it quite clear they won't be rushed. So you're not dealing here with 3 people who've popped into the Parliament on a night that no one was expecting. They're senior, experienced players.
And you can't just throw one the speakership and a few crumbs to a couple of the others.
So they're serious policy people, and they will want to discuss with both their genuine policy agendas. But I would hope they'd be cognisant of the fact that at this stage, at least, we have the majority of the vote, and certainly many more primary votes than the Labor Party.
No, it's not.
Okay, now it's going to be interesting to see when the 2 leaders do emerge tonight what they have to say. Certainly no one's going to be claiming anything, nor conceding anything. But we'll continue on our way, looking at a few seats, talking to some more people in their electorates. We're going to look. We were starting to look at the seat of North Sydney, Joe Hockey's seat, but Joe himself, I think, was on the phone trying to get through to Tony Windsor. Seat of North Sydney, Sydney's lower to middle North Shore, I guess.
Sure.
This is a safe Liberal seat. He's held it since 1996. 73% of the vote counted.
Joe Hockey's won the seat very comfortably. Significant increase in his first preference vote, up 8.6%. The Labor votes plummeted, and there's a big rise in the Green vote there. When we look at the vote after preferences, you can see what's happened, a 9.3% swing. It does appear that the swing has been patchy. It's been very big in some seats, much smaller in others. We saw a swing to Labor in Robertson. So one of those nights when you see very strange results.
Okay, the seat of Lily. This is Wayne Swan's seat in Brisbane's northern suburbs. He's won and lost this seat before, but he's held it this time since 1998. Had a margin of 8% going into tonight. That margin has been substantially reduced.
He's had a big swing against him at this election, and Rod McGarvey leads him on first preference votes, but there's enough votes there with the Greens, 12.5%, that after the distribution of preferences that Wayne Swan, he suffered a smaller swing than some of the members in marginal seats nearby. but he will go on to hold the seat. We can see there, swing 5.3, Wayne Swan 52.6, and after the district, let's just look at the pictures here. Wayne Swan, Treasurer, re-elected to Parliament.
Okay, Warren Truss in the seat of Wide Bay in Queensland, based in Maryborough, around Gympie.
This is a seat where the Labor Party picked another redhead, Nicole Ansell there. I think a campaign slogan was "Pick the redhead for Wide Bay."
Is there anything you don't know?
Well, it's easy to see on that picture, that one. But Warren Truss, 58.7, 11% there for the Greens. It's a substantial swing to the LNP. Now, it's rather hard not to think of Warren Truss as a national, but he's elected for the LNP at this election.
Okay, we've got the seat of Solomon, based in Darwin. Very, very marginal seat. It was a marginal seat for Labor, for Damien Hale, 0.2%, but that's gone.
Yes, it's a swing to the CLP, and the CLP regained Solomon. They held it for the first 2 terms of its existence since 2001, lost it last time. Natasha Griggs is well ahead on the first preference votes, 13% there for the Greens. The CLP have had a few problems over the last few days in the Northern Territory over big splits in the local party branches up there, but it's not been enough to upset the result in Solomon, where Natasha Griggs, who's the Deputy Mayor of Palmerston, will be the new member for Solomon.
Okay, we're going to look at the seat of Hasluck, and this is one of the critical seats. This is Western Australia, located in eastern Perth, picked up by Sharon Jackson. She returned, actually, into this seat at the last election. A knife-edge margin of 0.8%, with 74.2% of the vote counted. There's been a 1.4% swing at this stage to the Liberals, and everyone's waiting to see. Anthony?
Ken Wyatt's clearly ahead on the first preferences from Sharon Jackson for Labor, who's both won and lost in this seat previously. At this stage, she's well behind there. A substantial vote, about 1 in 8 votes, has gone to the Greens. When we look at the preferences and where these booths are from, we've got a preference count in 31 of the 38 booths. This stage we're saying is a 1.2% swing. We have the Liberal Party ahead, 50.4 to 49.6. So that's a seat which is too close to call. Our computer's just about giving it away. Have I got a later figure here? I've got a slightly later figure, and the figure's up to 50.6. So at this stage, it's a seat where Ken Wyatt, the Liberal MP, is the Liberal candidate, has the chance of becoming the first Indigenous MP in the House of Representatives.
And Ken Wyatt is standing by in the electorate of Hasluck now. Ken Wyatt, are you feeling any sense of confidence?
Not at the moment, Kerry. I'll wait until those final figures come in. But obviously, there's a change on the tally board.
Hang on. Wait until the noise subsides a bit. Now,
look, I'm waiting to see what the final figures are. When I get them and I see what the margin is and that I'm over the line, then I'll be confident.
Okay, but at the moment you don't really have a strong feel that you're going to get there?
Oh, look, I think that we will fall over the line. It's been a long, hard campaign, and certainly people that have worked with me and just door knocking and talking to people, we've had really good responses. They've been great.
So tell me what you think the key issues were for the people of Hasluck.
Oh, look, they varied. They varied from local issues. In Midland, for example, it is the roads, it is the gateway to Midland, which is a key concern. In Kenwick, it was law and order. And then across the suburbs, the mining tax, because small industries rely on the mining companies, fly-in, fly-out workers. Health and education also came up frequently. People also wanted and do want leaders that will do things for them, action their concerns, and then build on that and get results. So that's the challenge, and that came through clearly all the time.
So tell me, is it important to you that you are, if you win this seat, going to be the first Indigenous Australian to take a seat in the House of Representatives, the People's House?
Kerry, it is. Look, I'd be elated if that, when that comes a reality, because I think it gives us the chance to have a voice in the House. It is the People's House, and that's where you can influence some of the thinking, some of the decisions, and contribute to the debates that occur. Look, I think the other thing too is the case of breaking the brown glass ceiling, and on merit I've got 45 delegates in Hasluck who put their faith in me, chose me to become their representative, and have worked exceedingly hard to get me there.
So just tell me briefly, very briefly, your path into politics.
Actually, it probably began in my early years of just reading history, certainly as a school prefect, and then throughout my university, my college years, student council president, and then moving into 2 divisions of the Liberal Party, both Perth Division and Cowan.
And what are the particular passions that you would take into the Parliament, that you would take to Canberra?
I'd certainly want to look at some of the key issues around what's missing in this electorate, and that is some of the infrastructure issues. I want to take my own passion of education and health, and I certainly want to take the passion of dealing with Indigenous affairs in a very pragmatic and practical way that sees outcomes on the ground.
Well, Ken Wyatt, thanks very much for sharing that with us, and good luck.
Thank you very much, Kerry.
Okay, now I'm being told to have a seat run here, but I thought we were going to take a look at the changing... the seat of O'Connor. Okay. Everybody knows the name Wilson Tuckey, who has held the seat of O'Connor for how long? Since 1980.
He's the only member for the seat's ever had.
This is a sprawling seat in southern Western Australia, but this time he's had a national.
The key thing here is O'Connor used to be a wheat belt seat. It covered the entire wheat belt. The latest redistribution turned the figures around and put Kalgoorlie into the seat. Tony Crook nearly won the state seat of Kalgoorlie at the last state election, and on the state figures, the Nats are a chance of winning this seat. Wilson's vote is down, Mr Tuckey's vote is down under 40%, and on the preference count we've got at the moment, the Nationals will win that seat from Wilson Tuckey, which would be, it's got Nat retained, but that would be a Nat gain. We're not sure on that yet. There's a lot more counting to come in that seat, and there are some, of course, big towns which are yet to count. There'll be a lot more counting O'Connor, but that is another potential thing in the mix, because the Nationals haven't had an MP in federal parliament for more than 35 years.
I think Tony has said that he won't sit with the National Party in the Parliament. So
that's not a decided seat, I'd just point out. No. But I mean, I can't tell you if Geraldton is to come, Wilson will do better.
For high-tone policy reasons, rather than just being mischievous, we're of course directing our preferences to the national candidate, not to Wilson.
Absolutely outrageous. Do you know honours? No morals?
We're going to have a discussion about morality while we wait for the leaders to work out what they're going to say.
If you'd done the preference deal in Graindler in Sydney and Melbourne, they might have done it for you.
And Elbows safe.
Yeah, Albanese is safe,
We're going to take a look at the seat of Solomon, because we have the new member for Solomon, or the new about to be member for Solomon, standing by. This is the seat based around Darwin. Very, very marginal seat for Labor until now, but with 71% of the vote counted, this has gone for Labor.
Well, I've always said that the people of the Northern Territory up in Darwin like to vote for whoever's going to win the election. This is a bit of an undecided election, and of course the new member, Natasha Griggs, is the only member of the Country Liberal Party in the House of Representatives. So there's another little sort of mix in this. We've got 4 coalition parties at this election. At this stage, there's a 1.9% to the CLP, and Natasha Griggs, the Deputy Mayor of Palmerston, will be the new member for Solomon.
And Natasha Griggs is joining us now with a beaming smile. How are you feeling?
I'm very humbled and very excited about this opportunity. Absolutely delighted.
Now,
I've got a good crowd behind me supporting me.
Now, Anthony Green has said once before that that the people of Solomon, when they confront an election, endeavour to work out which side is going to win government and then vote accordingly. What's your view?
Well, hopefully they get it right again. So that's what I'm hoping for. I'd love Tony Abbott to be the next Prime Minister of Australia.
So what were the key issues up there for you? What's got you across the line?
Well, I've been door knocking for the last nearly 9 months, and there was a lot of local issues, law and order, environment, health issues were all very big issues in the community.
Okay, and was there a point where you began to feel confident that you were going to do this?
Oh, well, we were just thinking we always treated it like a marginal seat because that's what it's always been, and we just worked really hard, and it's obviously paid off, and I'm absolutely delighted and very humbled.
And but at the same time, you've won, but found yourself as one of the members of Parliament who has absolutely no idea what kind of government is about to be formed.
I know, it's very exciting, isn't it? Exciting times.
Exciting indeed. What are the things that are important to you in going into the federal Parliament from Darwin?
Well, Territorians like to are very parochial, so anything that impacts the territory is going to be on my agenda, and I've promised Territorians that I will fight very hard for them.
Okay, well, Natasha Griggs, thanks very much for joining us tonight. I think you've got a very enjoyable night ahead.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Now, Anthony, we're going to take a look at the changing seats.
I was going to say it's probably much warmer in Darwin than here in Canberra.
Certainly is. What is it, about 5 degrees?
These are the seats we're giving away tonight as changing party. We have the Labor Party gaining both Latrobe and McHugh, 2 seats they just missed out on last time. The Liberals have gained Bennelong with the defeat of Maxine McHugh. Gilmore, which has been recovered post-redistribution. Hasluck in Western Australia, we're now giving away to the Liberals. Macarthur, which is again post-redistribution. Macquarie post-redistribution has been won by Louise Marcus, the member for Greenway. Swan, again, that's a notional Liberal gain. When we look at the next page, Bonner in the inner suburbs of Brisbane. Brisbane, the inner city seat. Teresa Gambaro, the former member for Petrie, now elected as the member for Brisbane. Dawson, Michael Christensen, the new LNP member there. Dixon, Peter Dutton returned. Flynn, Ken O'Dowd, the new LNP member. Ford, Bert Van Manen. Herbert, Ewan Jones, the new LNP member. Leichhardt is an LNP gain. And I think we go on to another page yet. We've got Longman as an LNP gain. We've got Solomon as the CLP gain. Melbourne is a Green gain, and we have Denison as an independent gain at this stage at the end of the night.
Now, at this stage, we have absolutely no idea at what point either of the 2 leaders is going to show up, but it's our understanding that there's some talk going on between the 2 parties to try and clarify positions before they do.
Tossing a coin.
Step out in. But well, I don't think there's anything to toss for at this stage, Anthony. Other than
first to appear.
Maybe they want to be second to appear. But while we wait and while we're waiting for word, we're just going to cross now to Tony Jones on the tally room floor with Sarah Hanson-Young of the Greens, George Brandis, Liberals, and Penny Wong, Labor.
Let's come to you first, Penny Wong. You're not counting out Denison at this point to Andrew Wilkie. You seem to think you've still got a chance of keeping Denison.
Oh, look, I haven't seen the most recent two-party preferred, and I'm not sure about the preference flow, so I want to have a look at those before I'd count that out.
On the air, Tom. I'll have to bring you back.
Yes, we've got a conversation going on with George Brandis. I hope that I try to get some information.
The wonders of
I don't know. I hope it was
technology
important.
right
Did he give you some information, or do you have to go back first?
No. What was the question?
He was talking
What's your count right now?
Well, I'm assuming against my side that the Labor Party takes Lindsay, Corangamite and Greenway, but assuming with Anthony Green that we take Hasluck, I give us 73 and I give the Labor Party 72. But I mean those are fairly hard assumptions against the coalition, because in Lindsay the Labor vote is only 50.2%. In Greenway it's 50.4%. And in Corangamite, it's dead even, 50.0. So any one of those 3 seats, and I should say in fairness to Hasluck, could go either way. I mean, any one of those 4 could go either way.
I was just going to make a point that we haven't spoken about the amount of pre-poll and postal vote that obviously would not be included in these figures. I don't know if the Electoral Commission, I heard some rumour people were going to start to count postal votes tonight, but I assume these are booth results as opposed to postal vote or pre-poll results. The margin between those seats, between the parties on those seats, is significantly less than the number of outstanding votes. So
let's talk a little bit about the politics now, because you obviously assumed if you get 73, you'll have the first chance of going to those three independents who've already spoken, and try and persuade them, presumably, to form a government with Tony Abbott.
Well, I'm not going to anticipate any discussions that may take place.
At least we've got a clear picture of what those discussions might be like now, because they're going to sit down, they're going to come to a position, it sounds like, as Bob Katter called it, the rural Australia is at stake. We've got a position of power, and we'll exercise it. So it does sound like a fair bit of bargaining is going to be going on big issues.
Well, I'm sure Tony Abbott would be reminding people like Bob Katter and Tony Windsor and Rob Oakeshott that for all the criticisms they may have made of the coalition's period in government, it showed a great deal more interest in and affinity for people in rural and regional Australia than the Labor Party, which is essentially a party of the capital cities and the inner cities, has ever done.
Can you be sure? Just before I come in, can you be absolutely sure when they're talking about telecommunications, they might not be thinking the national broadband network could be part of the equation they would like to see?
Well, I wouldn't presume to say what is on the mind of the three, and.
I think Rob Oakeshott was loud and clearly saying that he wants improved telecommunications.
That's fair, Sarah, of course, and they can speak for themselves and obviously will. But my point is that it won't be lost on them that the Conservative side of politics does have a deeper and greater affinity with rural and regional Australia than Labor has ever pretended to.
All right, let's see Penny Wong answer that.
Well, look. I think what George is seeking to do is have a negotiation via television with three independents. I can say I've...
Well, we can clearly see they're watching this.
I think these are issues they will have to consider. We'll have to see.
Well, let me ask you this, because you were involved in these serious negotiations over the emissions trading scheme, the CPRS. I mean, where did these independents stand on those big issues, which obviously Tony Abbott is fundamentally opposed to?
Certainly Rob Oakeshott did come and see me. We had a discussion about some of the amendments he was moving, and he was very positive about the need to take action on climate change. Obviously there were some issues he didn't agree with, but I've also dealt with Tony Windsor on water issues, and he's a very good local member who does a lot for his electorate, and I always appreciated as a minister that he's so reasonable. I've always found him very reasonable to deal with, and you can have a very courteous conversation with him about what can and can't be done.
Can you imagine, let's say both leaders, as Tony Abbott and Julia Gillard, trying to cobble together some sort of big deal for rural communities that might attract these? I mean, they do say we're not after trinkets. That doesn't mean they aren't after fundamental changes to rural policy.
Look, this is the national government. That's what is up for negotiation tonight. If neither party can win the 76 seats, and at this stage neither George or I can find 76 seats on either side of the ledger. I thought it was important that I think both, certainly I heard Rob and Tony say, this is serious business, and it's about who should run the country. And I would hope that this would be something, if this were the case, that this had to be a discussion between either party and these three gentlemen.
Okay, now we're almost...
I would hope that would be something that could be approached not just on the basis of one or two policy areas, but on the broader policy mandate and broader policy vision of the party.
Just a quick response, and we're nearly out of time in this section. So.
I think one of the key things, and you look at these independents, and they've left the National Party because they believe that obviously the National Party had lost their way with country voters. Across the country tonight, we've seen the Greens pick up a big swag of that Bush vote, more than we ever have before. So there is change out there. People want to see not just the kind of cityites dominating the parliament. They really are concerned about rural Australia and what that means for food security, water security, and of course tackling climate change.
Huge issues, not enough time to talk about them tonight. We're going to go back to find out more about what's happening with all those undecided seats.
And with our understanding that the Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, is going to make her appearance very shortly, to be followed presumably soon after that by Tony Abbott, we'll take a look while we're waiting at the national swing, which may be a factor in determining who forms minority government. We've got Labor on 49.7% of the two-party preferred vote, Coalition on 50.3%, swing of 3%. Now that's with 76% of the vote counted. We'll cross to Lee Sales for a breakdown of those figures.
Thanks, Kerry. Well, if you've just arrived home from a Saturday night out, or if you've been watching football, you've missed quite a night in politics. To sum up, it looks like a hung parliament with the balance of power held by 4 independents and a Green. At this stage, it's not clear who'll form government, and it may not become clear tonight. In terms of the seats won so far, the Labor Party has 70. They have lost 15 seats. The Coalition has 72, having picked up 13. The Greens have 1 seat that they've picked up in Melbourne, and there are 4 independents in the parliament, 1 additional independent there in a Tasmanian seat. If we take a look at the primary vote and how that's worked out, the Labor Party is sitting on 38%, the Coalition 43.9%, the Greens on 11.5%, the minor parties, independents and others, 6.6%. How does that compare to 2007, those results in that year? There's been a 5.4% swing away from the Labor Party, a 1.7% swing to the Coalition. The Greens have had a 3.8%, and there's been a 0.1% swing away from minor parties and independents. If we take a look at the chamber graphic and see how it's looking at this stage, we're saying that the Labor Party has 70 seats, the Coalition 72, the Greens 1. As I said, the independents have 4. That's with 75% of the vote counted at this stage. If we throw in a few additional seats which are still outstanding but which are likely to fall in particular ways, we end up with the ALP 70, the Coalition 72, the Greens 1, independents still on 4. Now, the counting in Western Australia obviously started later than on the eastern seaboard. I'll take us through a few of the key seats in that state to sum up. Swan, if we start there, that was a seat affected by the redistribution after the last election, making it marginally Labor, but the sitting Liberal member, Steve Irons, has been able to hold on to that seat with a 3.1% swing to him. Hasluck, another key seat in this election campaign. It is a likely gain for the Liberal Party. Ken Wyatt will become the first Indigenous member of the House. I think I'm hearing that Julia Gillard is about to speak, so I'm going to throw back to Kerry O'Brien at this stage.
Thanks, Liam. We're going to continue our seat run, and some of these seats are remaining stubbornly in play even when we think they're no longer there. But we're going to look at the seat of Boothby in South Australia. This was a seat Labor really did hope to win, held by Andrew Southcott for the Liberal Party on a margin of 2.9%. Hang on, this is very fluid. We're going to cross to Labor Party headquarters. Julia Gillard is arriving. Now, we know the story. We've heard it so many times over the past few weeks. The amazing and dramatic changes in Labor's fortunes in government. Kevin Rudd gone on June 24. Julia Gillard replacing him as the first female Prime Minister in Australian history, and absolutely in the balance whether she becomes the first elected female Prime Minister in history. But if she does, it will be on the basis of a minority government. This has been an absolutely roller coaster ride for Julia Gillard. We're told that she's backstage and you can hear the chanting going on, but she could be out at any minute. This has been a very tricky night, and in the last half hour or so, Labor and Liberal have been talking furiously, trying to work out how they deal with this situation, even down to the issue of who speaks first. And of course, they're both going to be very conscious of walking a tightrope in what they have to say. because there are 5 independents. There are 5 independents in play, counting the new Green member for Melbourne. And here is Julia Gillard now.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much. Friends, Bill Clinton once famously said in a previous election in America, "The people have spoken, but it's going to take a little while to determine exactly what they've said." And that is where we find ourselves tonight. Obviously, this is too close to call. There are many seats where the result is undecided and where it will take a number of days of counting to determine the result. Friends, as we know in our great democracy, every vote is important, every vote must be counted, and we will see that happen in the few days ahead of us. And what we know from tonight's result is that there will be a number of independents in the House of Representatives playing a role as the next government of Australia is formed. I acknowledge and congratulate Rob Oakeshott on his re-election as the member for Lyme, Tony Windsor on his re-election as the member for New England, Bob Katter on his re-election as the member for Kennedy, and the election of Adam Bandt to the seat of Melbourne. It is also possible, but unknown at this time, whether Andrew Wilkie will be the member for Denison in the future Parliament. Friends, can I say to you and can I say to the Australian nation, in these days, as the election result is being determined, the conventions of our wonderful democracy ensure that I will continue to lead the government and provide strong and stable government until the outcome of the election is clearly known. And friends, what I can also say to you tonight is I acknowledge the election of these independents and a member of the Greens to the House of Representatives. I have had a good track record in the federal parliament, working positively and productively with the independents in the House of Representatives and working with the Greens in the Senate. I believe in respecting the role of every representative in the House of Representatives, including the independents and the Greens. Can I acknowledge my opponent, Mr Abbott, in this campaign? Mr Abbott and I have got very different worldviews, different values and different visions for the future of this country. But I would say to Mr Abbott that he has been a formidable advocate for his side of politics. He's made of stern stuff, he's shown that in this campaign, and I congratulate him for that. And friends, in front of this crowd and to the Labor faithful gathered around the nation, to the Australians who kept the faith and voted for Labor today, to Australians around the nation, this campaign has been about a positive plan for the nation's future. This great political party and the men and women of the trade union movement have always believed in fairness and decency for working Australians, and we believe that now. And we know that fairness and decency starts with the ability to get a job, hold a job, have a job, aspire to get the next job, a better job, and to make a life on the basis of it. And we as a government have protected that all-important right to work and get a job. And we as a government have returned to working Australians the fairness and decency at work that they should be able to expect. And in this campaign, as we fought for a positive plan for the nation's future, we've continued to fight for Australian jobs. We've continued to fight for a vision of the future that says every child, no matter where they live in this country, no matter the circumstances of their birth, that every child is entitled to a great education. In this campaign, we have continued the great tradition of the Labor movement, a tradition that believes the health care of each of us is important and that it is an offence to all of us if one of us cannot get the health care that we deserve. That was the foundation stone of Medicare. It's the foundation stone of the health policies and plans that we have put forward before the nation. And we, of course, are an optimistic political party. We have always believed that the best days of this country are in front of it, not behind us, that we can work to build those better days by working together. In this campaign, we have fought for a positive plan for those better days, using the new technology of the future, the National Broadband Network, banding together and dealing with the pressing challenge of climate change. We have said to Australians, don't be afraid of the future. We can deal with the future, we can manage it, we can build a better nation together. I would like to acknowledge those who have fought alongside me for this vision during the days of the campaign. I would particularly like to acknowledge Amanda Lampe, my Chief of Staff, and the staff who have worked with her. Thank you very much, Amanda. I would like to acknowledge Carl Batar and the Labor team he has led in Campaign HQ. Thank you very much to Carl Batar. I would like to acknowledge the Campaign Reference Group that has worked with me for the role that they have played in the campaign. I thank them for their efforts. I also thank each and every candidate, each and every member, each and every senator who has stood for Labor in this campaign. I specifically want to acknowledge the efforts of those Labor members who have been in the federal parliament and tonight are not being returned to the federal parliament. It is always a privilege and an honour to seek the trust of your fellow Australians to represent and to serve them. I know my colleagues, though they will be disappointed by this outcome for them, feel that they had the opportunity to gain the trust of their fellow Australians, and that's a very, very precious thing. I thank them for their efforts. I thank them for their fight in this campaign. And finally, can I say to you, those who have kept the faith, I know that we tonight do not know what the outcome is going to be. There are anxious days ahead. But in those anxious days, I'll keep fighting for our positive plan for this nation's future. The fight for that plan isn't over yet. We will continue to fight for it in the days to come. We will continue to fight to form a government in this country to deliver to the working Australians, working men and women of this country, a government that understands their needs, values their jobs, wants to see their children get a decent education, wants to make sure that they never have to fear illness because healthcare is there for them, that makes sure they never have to feel a loss of their rights of work, and a government that is as optimistic about their future as this fantastic nation deserves. Friends, thank you very much.
Julia Gillard speaking there at the start of her next tightrope walk, potentially into history as the next elected Prime Minister or the first elected female Prime Minister of Australia or not. But we've got the landscape continues to change, doesn't it? There are seats, Anthony's telling me that the seat of Brisbane, which was given away to the Liberals from Labor, has now come back into play. You're saying Greenway is now definitely Labor?
Yes.
In New South Wales?
I think that's right.
That Lindsay looks like it's heading to Labor?
Labor's definitely won 70 seats. I think they will win both Corangamite and Lindsay. At the moment, they're in our doubtful column.
But that would give them 72?
72.
Yes.
And Brisbane, on final figures, has come back to being much closer. It's only 900 votes at the end of the night. So that's a really close contest. So Labor could end up with 72.
And then there's Denison.
And then there's Denison, which...
And Hasluck.
And
Which
we
I
really
won't.
don't know what's happening in Denison. And as
I still haven't got 76 for Labor, I'm sorry.
We're also just having a bit of a astonishment there, because on the most recent count in Victoria in the Senate, the DLP win the last spot, which is a bit of an upset.
There are many Australians...
Something like going into the TARDIS and doing Enter the Time Warp again, but anyway, let's see what happens.
I think the problem is the Coalition's vote in Victoria is very low on the current count, and if it's as low as it is, then preference deals start to turn around, and it may yet be that there are 3 Labor and 1 Green, but there's a lot more counting to come. But the Senate result has been poor for the Coalition in Victoria.
But let me just come back to this. You're saying you can see through Lindsay and
Corangamite.
Labor moving to 72.
Yes, I think 72 looks likely for
and
Labor.
Definitely and likely 72 Liberal.
Yes.
If Denison stays with Labor, does that give Labor 73?
73, and then there's the 3 independents, and the last seat.
And
I've
then
got
there's
in
Hasluck.
If Hasluck goes to Liberal and Brisbane goes to Liberal, that's 73.
Right.
For the Coalition.
So 73 all.
Possible.
Yeah, possible.
That's possible. But we would have the advantage of the higher primary vote and still the majority of the two-party preferred vote.
You keep talking this up, Nick, but it's not a first-past-the-post system. It's
it might be relevant to the independents in deciding who they think should govern. Also, the fact
I have a feeling, Nick, that they're going to be very clear about making up their own minds.
Well, I'm sure they will be.
I've been advocating optional preferential voting to you, for Nick, for many, many years. And you still
I'm
haven't
starting
taken
to
my
believe in it,
advice.
Anthony. I'm starting to believe in it.
We're just going to cross briefly, while we're waiting for Tony Abbott, we're going to cross briefly to our panel on the tally room floor with Tony James. Tony?
Okay, well, we've had our first Indigenous MP, we've got our youngest MP in Wyatt Roy, we've got our first Green MP, and now we've got the Prime Minister beginning her speech by congratulating 3, possibly 4 independents. Extraordinary election. I'll get the final thoughts from each of you. Sarah Hanson-Young.
Oh, look, I think at the end of the night, the Greens are the winners here. It's been a Green slide. We've doubled our representation in the Parliament. We've gone from 5 to 10. I think, we're all smiles.
Penny Wong.
I actually wanted to say something about Julia Gillard, who I think has performed extraordinarily well. I think she's one of the best performers this Parliament has seen, and if she gets the opportunity to be re-elected Prime Minister, I think she will be a great and outstanding Prime Minister. So we'll see if she gets that opportunity again.
George Brandis, will she get an opportunity?
Well, she shouldn't, because the Labor Party lost the election. On any fair assessment, when you lose the two-party preferred vote, when you're 5.7% behind in the primary vote, when it is very likely that you will have fewer seats in the House of Representatives than the Coalition. On what test, on what contorted definition of democracy does that produce the conclusion that the Labor Party is in a position to ask the Governor-General to commission them to form a government? The people voted tonight. Stephen Smith, who usually is very circumspect, but Stephen Smith a moment ago was saying, well, the vote count doesn't matter. Of course the vote count matters in a democracy, and the people voted to throw this government out.
Okay, I'm going to have to get Penny Wong to respond to that.
Well, I mean, I can recall in 1998, I think we won the two-party preferred vote nationally and didn't win government. So, I mean, you can cut this a lot of ways. There was also, to pay due regard to the Greens, there was also a big left-of-centre vote that wasn't for Tony Abbott. I'm not going to do what George is doing, which is to campaign through the television set to the independents in the Parliament. I hope that the decision of those people will be made on the basis of who they think should lead the country, because that is the question that is going to be before them.
If we had a fair voting system here and there was one vote per person, as it should be, the Greens would have 17 seats. You know, so it's interesting how it pans out at the end of the night.
Well, can I have a quick rejoinder to Penny, please?
That means you get two bites of the chair.
In 1998 was different because the coalition won a clear majority in the House of Representatives. There are two ways to judge this. The aggregate vote.
George, can I just say that the wonderful thing about this is that this is the conversation that's going to go on behind doors, behind closed doors, with those three independents, possibly four independents.
Let me just make this point.
Yes, as long as it's brief.
It is brief.
He's really brief.
You can judge us by the number of seats won. You can judge it by the aggregate vote. Usually they're the same. Sometimes, as in 1998, one pointed one way and the other pointed the other way. But this time, whichever way you slice it, the Labor Party has lost this election.
I don't know if that was being brief or being a barrister with a brief.
Precisely.
But one way or another, I think we're going to have to leave you all. Sarah Hanson-Young.
Thank you.
Penny Wong, George Brandis. It's been lively. Thank you.
Okay. This has been an amazing night, and the amazing night continues. Even on the argument of the two-party preferred and who's got the highest two-party preferred vote. Are you saying the Electoral Commission is giving a...
Well, no, you've got to hand it to George. I mean, he's a man who'll, never stop arguing in a good cause.
Are you now going to say that you agree with him?
No. What I'm going to say is that Anthony's got the 2PP at 49.7 for us and 50.3. I've just been told by one of our people that the AEC has got it at 50.5 to us and 49.5 to them. So, but the real point is this is going to bounce around. There are, like in Corangamite, you've got nearly 20,000 pre-polls and postals. This is going to bounce around. And I know that we're all tempted to argue our case, in front of the independents tonight, but they've made it clear they're just going to take it very sensibly and very calmly, and that's what we should do. There'll be counts and recounts. There'll be seats going from won to lost to doubtful. This is going to take a week or more, and in the meantime, the government will continue to govern in caretaker mode, and in about a week's time or longer, we'll get some clarity.
I'd also give everyone a warning for tomorrow. Tonight, everything in our computer system and in the AEC's electoral computer system is all based on comparing results booth by booth. Tonight, they turn that off, and tomorrow morning, there'll be raw counts.
That's right.
And some of these seats are going to look a little bit different when you look at the website
Now, just
tomorrow.
explain that further. When you say tonight they'll turn these off and tomorrow it's raw counts.
Well, at this stage of the night, with all the votes in, we're predicting seats like Corangamite, I am predicting to be 50-50 using this comparison. That's taking account of the trends in the postals and absence. When you look at the raw numbers, Darren Cheeseman's on 50.8, so he's well ahead. That difference is created by the fact that last time there was a sitting Liberal member who absolutely threw everything at it and all the resources of the Victorian Liberal Party, and he did really well with the postal and absent votes. There isn't a sitting Liberal there this time, so I don't expect the coalition to do nearly as well, and so Cheeseman is much more likely to win, even though on this projected figure
and you're saying that could be replicated in a number of other seats.
And that's the same in Lindsay, it's the same in Greenway, is there isn't a sitting Liberal there this time, so I don't think the Liberal Party will do quite as well on those votes.
And all that goes to say is that we haven't got a clue.
Exactly. We've sat here since 6 o'clock tonight to finally come to the conclusion at 11:30 that we haven't got a clue. Wonderful.
All I've got to say, some of our competitors...
This is the honest panel.
some of our competitors spent the last...
Like I say, again, unlike George, I am happy to make a point against my own favour, which is, and I've said it earlier, the first wave of postal vote ballots came out at the worst possible time in the campaign for us. Now, that may well have an adverse impact.
I'm also fascinated that some of our competitors have spent 12 hours speculating on the result before there was any counting, and now we can continue to speculate for the next week and a half.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful, Anthony. If the great Australian public were bored witless by the campaign by the end of it, I think the only thing that was left that was of real interest was, of course, who was going to win. But the actual debates and the toing and froing and the mudslinging and the negative campaigns, I think everyone was heartily sick of that by the end. Do you think you guys can now take call it a truce and just take a holiday, take a political holiday for a few days?
To run the country for a couple of weeks.
Exactly.
Do you think
the country might be better off?
Well, I think. Do you think some of those people who put bets of $25,000 on, thinking they'd make a few bucks over 2 or 3 days, are going to be happy having it sat there for 4 or 5 weeks.
Well, there was somebody who allegedly put a bet of $200,000 on Labor at $1.50 about a week ago. They'd be sweating.
It took them a month to settle in Tasmania.
In fact, that money's probably gone.
I paid a little bit of attention to the various bettings, and the macro, Labor will win, looked like it was a good bet. When you actually got down to the micro, it's much closer than that. And one of the real problems we had was expectations, and in our own stuff at the end of the week, it was half the people. Sorry, I think a quarter of the people voting who were indicating an intention to vote Liberal in our research. Only a quarter of those thought the Liberal Party would win the election. So expectation was a real problem for us. We had that throughout the campaign.
Yeah.
So the expectation, and that was reflected by the bookies. But when you actually burrowed down into it, the global figure, who'll win Labor or Liberal, the odds were in our favour. When you actually went through it seat by seat, it was a much tighter contest.
Kerry, I'm told Tony will be speaking quite shortly.
We're through to the venue. We're just waiting. But I imagine both sides, but particularly on the Labor side, as you go back through the campaign, you'll be thinking about the various things that were certainly unscheduled that took votes from you and took oxygen from it. There were the various leaks. Yeah. There was the leak about the secret deal. There was the leak about what Julia Gillard may or may not have said in Cabinet. There was the business about the Citizens' Assembly. There were all of these things individually that were at Labor's cost.
What really hurt us, and hurt us deeply, was the leaks at the beginning of the second week, and it took us a good 2 weeks to get out of that. The first week we had a good week. The last 2 weeks were sort of draws to narrow wins our way, but we had effectively a disastrous week 2 and week 3, which cost us very severely, and we just could not get our message up in that context, and that was a real problem for us.
But by the same token, Tony Abbott has provided Australia with a fascinating story in these last 8 months since he became leader, which he did by one vote, as we all remember now. He's run an absolutely Herculean campaign. We now know why he was running those marathons and doing those incredible bike rides. It was so he could get through the last 36 hours without sleep. One wonders whether he picked up any votes in the Sydney markets that might have.
Well, I think he did really finish strongly, and I don't think.
But it was an amazing campaign for a man who.
And I think Labor's mistake was to underestimate Tony Abbott as a campaigner and to build its whole campaign on the proposition that at some point Tony was going to quite blow up. I think he's demonstrated that he's fit to be Prime Minister, but demonstrated tremendous discipline and focus and energy.
Well, looking back, will you now acknowledge that you too were just that little bit surprised when he actually got up in the party room ballot by the one vote, when Joe Hockey got knocked out of the ring and suddenly Malcolm Turnbull is...
Well, I think I acknowledged at the time that that was always going to be a close result, and
but I don't think it was quite scripted that way, was it?
Well, no, I won't go into the details of the party room, but look, it's great credit to Tony that he persevered, that he's pulled the party back from the brink. We were in terrible trouble last November, and what he's done, it looks like he may well have knocked off 2 Labor Prime Ministers in the space of 9 months. It's an extraordinary phenomenon in Australian political history.
Tony's had a very good campaign. He's done very well. There's no point.
A very disciplined campaign.
Well, very disciplined. When he became leader, I said to my colleagues, look, Tony will hurt us. If we're on the wrong side of a policy or the wrong side of politics, Tony will hurt us and hurt us badly. He's very effective. He has been very disciplined. That's to his credit. But I think Nick might, in his quieter moments, concede that he's probably been even more disciplined than Nick was expecting.
Never doubted it for a minute. I've always known Tony's got a great capacity.
But you did.
That's why I backed him.
You did mention that you were agreeably surprised at the campaign that he ran, and you made that.
Well, what surprised me was his extraordinary temperament. He was remarkably even-tempered. I've worked with every leader from Fraser onwards in the Liberal Party. and Tony was the most even-tempered, the one least influenced by the sort of pressures of the job, who took it in his stride. It was a remarkable performance, and as Stephen would know as well as anybody, you know, the pressures in a campaign, the ups and downs, what goes on behind the scenes, the dramas, are you know, legend, and he handled them with great equanimity.
We probably should stop talking about him because he might be listening backstage to what we're saying. It could be holding him up coming out. But this, I'll say again, that we sort of slowly felt ourselves drawn into this extraordinary tale of an election campaign and an outcome, to the extent that we know it thus far, like no other that any of us have seen, and probably that hasn't happened in our lifetimes. And we do have to go back to 1940 and Robert Menzies and John Curtin.
Well, Labor did take an enormous risk in you know, knocking off an incumbent Prime Minister, and I think underestimated the flow-on consequence. There are always, I'm actually one who doesn't like changing leaders very often, because there are always these unintended consequences, the sort of, you know, and I agree with you, and Stephen may not be able to say it, but I do think Labor made a terrible mistake rushing to the polls. They really should have.
Quite a few on the Labor side who would agree with you.
I think that was a mistake. And then for a whole lot of reasons, their campaign got derailed.
And I must confess that it did strike me at the time. One of the things in that kind of stunning moment, as we all tried to absorb that Kevin Rudd was suddenly no longer Prime Minister within his first term, I did think of the South Australian experience again, with Brown and Olsen, where Brown was knocked off as leader, as Liberal Premier. Olsen took over and paid a price, and they nearly lost government with a 9% swing, and a very big factor in that was South Australian people saying, we don't like what you did.
Yeah, no, for me as a South Australian and someone obviously very close to all of that, it was history repeating itself, and if they'd asked me, I might have forewarned them. But they didn't ask.
Or you might not have.
I think one of the factors which caused the decision to be made to go, you know, for the poll on the August timetable was we found it as a government very difficult to get any clear air. There was a change of leader in the run-up to an election, and we found it very difficult. And I preface my remarks by saying this is not directed, it's not a criticism of the media, but we found it very.
Feel free.
No,
Stephen.
We found it very difficult. We found it very difficult to get a focus on governing and government, and came to the conclusion that the only way we could break through that was just to throw down the gauntlet and go for the campaign.
But hadn't Julia Gillard set herself up for that in a sense by saying there are these three things on which I'm going to clear the deck, and there was an implication in that once we've cleared the deck, we'll go to an election. And in that regard, it was, and there was also strong. I mean, it was clear that inside the Labor Party there was a debate going on between those who wanted to go early and take advantage of the honeymoon, and those who, the wiser heads, as it possibly now turns out, who argued to wait until October.
But I've been through, like Nick, I've been through a lot of federal and state elections. There's always an argument about timing. There's always an argument about timing. And when you win, there's 1,000 fathers and mothers of the decisions, and when you lose, there's a smaller number of people who take the responsibility. My own judgment was I thought that the only way we would get clear air was in the context of a campaign. The strength and the discipline of Tony's campaign effort was to effectively make the campaign a referendum or a judgment on us, not to have the contrast, we needed to get a choice. You know, Labor, Liberal, Julia Gillard, Tony Abbott. He, because of the success that he had in the campaign, made it more of a macro by-election referendum on us. That was his success in being much more disciplined than people were expecting.
And even on the issue of the debate, it was in the first instance Tony Abbott threw down the gauntlet to 3 debates. Julia Gillard was not the first Prime Minister to say no to that. But then when she said, yes, I'll give you a debate, we'll have a debate on the economy, and that was clearly an attempt to bring the focus back to the economy, which Labor judged would work to its benefit. And there was a period there where she slowly kind of took the running with that she was actually maybe scoring some points by saying, I want to debate the economy, Tony Abbott now doesn't. But then suddenly it seemed to have turned around and it was Tony Abbott saying Julia Gillard won't debate.
Yeah. Well, we had the advantage of having offered the three and been rejected. And then Tony did subsequently offer to have a debate, as you know, with Chris
half the
Ullman.
time.
Well, I mean, if she wants a debate, surely she'd grab the half hour.
No,
She was
you
the
could say,
one
we'll
that
have a
wanted-
5-minute debate.
It seems extraordinary that she'd knock it back. And I think that destroyed her argument.
Let's cut to the chase. If you hadn't come to the conclusion that you were ahead because of our difficulties in week 2 and week 3, you would have gone for the debate because you would have seen that as a vehicle for trying to get back in the game. So,
it was a dance, wasn't it?
Well, it was. And Labor decided they needed a debate because they'd fallen behind.
Yeah.
So,
I think, look...
but each of you paints it in virtue when we all know it's, you know...
Well, I think
each wants the other side to be painted as the nasty spinners. But the truth is, Nick, you all spin. You all spin.
Well, modern campaigning is a matter of message and message control. I mean, yeah, whether you call it spin or not, but it's got to be credible. It's got to stack up. Otherwise, the public do see straight through it.
I think we got back into the game. We were completely out of the game. We were so out of the game that we stopped polling because we had up to 10% swings against us in the crunch marginal seats during that terrible period. Then, with the various distractions, whether it was Mark Latham, whatever, making it impossible for us to get back on track. We got back on track for 2 reasons. I think Julia's grace under pressure, like one of the strong moments of the campaign for her was the press conference where she had to respond to the allegations raised by the leaks. The Q&A, she performed strongly and well under pressure, and that got her credit and street cred. The second thing, we did for a period do a good job of getting it back onto the economy. And I think one of the problems we had was a lot of what we were arguing were abstract. We said we prevented the country from going into a recession. That's an abstract notion because the country doesn't feel the direct adverse consequences.
A person doesn't feel the loss of a job until they've lost it.
That's right. Whereas Tony had short, simple, sharp political messages, and which rang true because, as I said to my colleagues, if we're on the wrong side of a policy or a political argument, he will hurt us politically, and he did.
He always said he wasn't going to die wondering. But he was always going to give this campaign absolutely every ounce that he had.
But the worst moment for Labor, I thought, was the real Julia, fake Julia episode. I thought that was devastating, really, and played right into our hands. And really, I thought, changed the whole momentum of the campaign. I think Labor had real trouble catching up after that.
But do you think that was just another strategy, or do you think that was her reacting in frustration at having presumably felt she was in something of a straitjacket in the debate, and presumably that was acting on advice?
Oh, I think exactly. I think she was in a straitjacket constructed by these New South Wales Labor right apparatchiks.
And here is Tony Abbott now, who would be feeling anything but in a straitjacket as he prepares to give us his impressions of where his mind is on arguments of minority governments and who should have first crack. But I would think that, like Julia Gillard, he'll take a very prudent approach here, particularly if he's been advised by Nick Minchin. But as we've said, this has been an incredible ride, and when Tony Abbott sat down maybe 18 months ago to write his a political manifesto called Battle Lines, as he was writing it, he would have had absolutely no concept that before this term was out, he would be leader and within an ace of becoming Prime Minister. I would imagine when the head hits the pillow tonight, it'll be spinning. And I wonder what thoughts are going through John Howard's head. He's been a very strong mentor of Tony Abbott for over a long time.
He'd take, I think, great satisfaction in the performance.
Peter Costello's head.
Well, I won't go there.
He'll be saying, if Tony Abbott could do this, what could I have done?
You think he might say that? I'm not sure about that. He's probably enjoying being out of politics.
Humble man. Yeah.
He's enjoying being out of politics, I think, very much.
It's a good thing he is fit because there's an awful lot of backslapping going on at the moment. And I mean the surprises, the surprise turns of the Liberal Party through these 3 years. Brendan Nelson was a surprise leader, really, of the Liberal Party.
I mean, the Liberal Party, you know, it was very difficult for us going into opposition. We had, you know,
and here he
12 years of government.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a night for pride in our achievements. For satisfaction at the good results that have been achieved, but above all else, measured reflection on the magnitude of the task ahead. There should be no premature triumphalism tonight. There should simply be an appreciation that this has been a great night for the Australian people. And I thank the Australian people, wherever they are, whoever they voted for their commitment to this great democracy. I have to say to all of you, and this is a very, very enthusiastic crowd, and I love you for your enthusiasm. But I have to say to you, that I feel humbled as I think of the responsibilities that could lie ahead, but I feel so proud of the efforts of every supporter of the coalition right around our country. I want to particularly thank, at the outset of these remarks, I want to thank our party president, Alan Stockdale, and our party director, Brian Loughnane. I want to thank my friends and colleagues. I want to thank Warren Truss, the leader of the National Party, and I want to thank Julie Bishop, our deputy leader. I particularly want to thank the Shadow Treasurer, Joe Hockey, who has made such a contribution to the economic plans that we have brought forward. But I also want to thank my own staff who have worked so incredibly hard over the last 9 months and on whose hard work tonight's result rests. But it has been a team effort. I am the leader of the team, but it has been a team effort, and this is a very strong team. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank all the candidates for election right around our country, representing whichever party they represent on their election. I particularly note that it seems like the lower house of Parliament has, for the first time in its history, an Indigenous member. And I am so proud that on current counting, it looks likely that the first ever Indigenous member of our House of Representatives will be a Liberal member of Parliament. I want to encourage all of those candidates who are still in contention, and I want to commiserate with all those good people who have lost their seats in the parliament, whatever party those people represent. They have all made a great effort for our country. I want to thank all the party members and supporters right around our country, whichever party they represent, for their efforts, because without political parties we would not have this great democracy. I acknowledge my opponent, Julia Gillard. No. The last 8 weeks could not have been easy for her, but she has certainly worked extremely hard for her cause under difficult circumstances. But I want to say, above all else, tonight has been a win for the Australian people. They are the stern judges of all governments, and they are the ultimate arbiters of all policies, and we must always respect their judgment. We do not have a clear result from tonight, and I want to say that until a clear result has emerged from this election, that the caretaker conventions under which the government has been operating for the last 5 weeks must continue. What is clear from tonight is that the Labor Party has definitely lost its majority. And what that means is that the government has lost its legitimacy. And I say that a government which found it very hard to govern effectively with a majority of 17 seats will never be able to govern effectively in a minority. I should point out to this room in particular, the great fact that has emerged tonight is that 400,000 more Australians voted for the coalition parties than voted for Labor. And the Labor Party achieved the lowest primary vote of any governing party at least since the Second World War. So it's pretty clear, ladies and gentlemen, that the Australian people have responded to the clear policies that we took forward to the election. The Australian people want their government to end the waste, to repay the debt, to stop the big new taxes, to stop the boats, and to provide a fair go for struggling families. They also responded to our longer-term agenda. They want local control of schools and hospitals. They want practical measures to improve our environment. They want strong policies to help families, and above all else, they want a strong economy that's managed by a government which understands the needs of small business. But the people have not just responded to the strong policies that we took to the election. The Australian people have decisively rejected factionalism in all its forms. This election has, to some extent at least, been a referendum on the political execution of a Prime Minister. And the Australian people have said that whatever else might characterise our political culture, it should never be characterised by the knock on the door at midnight by the faceless men of the Labor factions. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I say on this remarkable night in our political history that the coalition is back in business. The Liberal and National parties are back in business, we stand ready to govern, and we stand ready to offer the Australian people stable, predictable and competent government. And over coming days, I will be talking to the independent members of Parliament to ensure that a government can be formed that offers just that to the Australian people. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, let me say that every single member of Parliament serves in Parliament with the permission of his or her family. I am so proud of my family, everything that I have achieved. Thanks, Tony. Everything that I have achieved in public life has been achieved with the support and encouragement of my family, and I point out to everyone in this room who has worked so hard to bring about a good result that my darling angel wife Margie was delivering food. She was delivering food to the hungry booth workers of Warringah, and my other children up here were handing out how to vote in the electorate of Lindsay. Finally, let me say, ladies and gentlemen, that I want to thank the electors of Warringah. I want to thank the electors of Warringah for the faith that they have shown in me on 7 consecutive elections. It is an unalterable fact of public life in this country that you cannot be a national leader without being a local member first and foremost. I will never forget the people of Warringah. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for all the support that you have given to me and to coalition candidates right around our country. Your exuberance, your enthusiasm, your excitement is well merited. And I thank you for it. But I beg of you, please, spare a thought tonight for those who do not feel so excited, for those who do not feel so victorious. In the end, this election is not about us. It is about our country, and it is incumbent on us to offer Australia the better government that a great country needs and deserves, and I pledge the rest of my time in public life to that great end. Thank you very much.
Okay, Nick Minchin, your reaction?
Well, I think Tony